Hello, 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 and welcome to another video. I am Horror Queen Cosplay, and today I just wanted to do a little video talking about the video games Madison and the Mortuary Assistant, specifically as video games that tackle the genre of demonic possession horror. Now, I don't intend to do intense spoilers for the games, however, I will be talking little bits and pieces here, so you definitely will be spoiled about certain mechanics, potentially scares, things like that. So I can't completely guarantee it absolutely spoiler free. And I do apologize that I'm not doing one of those fancy video game essays where you see my face, life stuff is going on, and my house is a mess. So really, this is how we are going to record this today. Now, I won't lie, I am an absolute baby when it comes to horror that deals with ghosts and the devil. I know, yes, I am horror queen, but there's just something absolutely terrifying about this type of horror. I don't know. Maybe it's because I can logically tell myself I know Michael Myers isn't gonna come bursting down my door, but the thought of a ghost in my house just makes me... Oof. Yeah, no, thank you. However, I do find it very fascinating as a subgenre of horror, especially in novel format. Now, the idea of doing exorcist, demonic possession-based horror as a novel far predates William Blatty's novel of The Exorcist in 1971. William Peter Blatty, my apologies, actually. There are plenty of other novels such as The Case Against Satan, as well as more modern takes as my personal favorite, My Best Friend's Exorcism, written by Grady Hendrix, and countless other novels. I swear, there are too many that I've read, enjoyed, and could potentially list in this video. That would have to be, frankly, its own video if you guys wanted me to talk about exorcist-based horror just in novel format. And the same can be said, certainly, when it comes to film. Things like, of course, the original Exorcist movie, The Taking of Deborah Logan, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, so on and so on and so on. And I'm sure I'm going to be missing a ton that y'all are going to be talking about in the comments. Go right ahead and tell me about your favorite Exorcist-based movie in the comments. So I just want to touch briefly about how the video game genre tackles exorcist-based horror. It definitely is particularly interesting to me because video games, by their nature, are far more immersive than, say, a film is. A film, you may be immersed in the story, but you are still detached as an audience member because you are still watching it play out. The same can be said for a novel. You're, yes, picturing what is happening in your head, but you are not that character. You are not controlling their actions. Video games have a lot more autonomy because you are physically pressing buttons to make the character pick things up, to make them walk through the creepy, spooky, haunted house, and so on and so on. That's very much its own video, and there are countless of other video game essays that talk about how incredible and different the medium is and specific and unique it is. Heck, even I did a video talking about video game film adaptations and things like that. But something that I really appreciated about both Madison and the Mortuary Assistant, games from indie companies that have come out this recent year of 2022 back to back, something that they tackle that I really wanted to talk about and was actually discussing briefly during my stream of the Mortuary Assistant. Yes, these are all stream clips. It was much easier for me to just pull clips from my stream than to re-record clips again. Something I was talking about was how I appreciated that both the games took the exorcism genre and did it from the perspective of the person who is being possessed. Now, unfortunately, exorcisms do have a history of occurring against somebody who maybe is suffering from mental health illness or other things, and it is a long spanning history across multiple cultures, so we're not going to be touching deeply into that, but I did want to highlight these two particular games. I didn't want to compare them too much, but mostly highlight what each of these games do that makes them flourish with that genre. Something I really appreciate about these games was just how absolutely terrifying they are. Now, yes, I may be an absolute baby when it comes to horror, I mentioned that before, but I found with games like, say, Outlast, for example, that rely very heavily on shock horror, I became desensitized to them as I played on. I just eventually was like, oh, okay, that thing's happening. But with both of those games, the Mortuary Assistant and Madison, I was truly terrified the entire time. The indie horror landscape can become very saturated, so it's very, very refreshing to see two games like this, especially ones that, again, do something different with the exorcism-based genre. Now, of course, they're not the only games that, again, that deal with the Exorcist genre. There is the Legion VR game that absolutely made me cry, but that is not somebody who is being possessed actively. Sure, you're being attacked by demons and entities, but it's a little bit different. Both Madison and the Mortuary Assistant, you play as protagonists who are trying to ward off, discovering the mysteries of, and just deal overall with an entity trying to possess them. And it's downright terrifying. And I think these two games really can be a great example of what other indie horror games and even AAA games can learn in terms of pacing, environment, things like that, and just overall the way that the demons and entities play with your mind as the viewer just as much as they play with the main characters. The hallucinations, the tiny little movements off camera, off screen, truly, truly terrifying. Heck, even Madison does fall under the I'm gonna use jump scares for most of the game. Did not get stale at all. Truly terrifying. Truly, truly terrifying. So, starting off, I wanted to talk about Madison since that one came out first. You play as a boy named Luca who is pretty much the next victim of an entity trying to possess him. There have been others in the past. There are multiple other entities in this game. Now, again, I'm not going to go super duper in depth into the story and things like that because, frankly, I want you guys to play these games too. I hope that this tickles your interest and potentially makes you think about things while you play these games. Now, there are multiple entities in the story of Madison. However, Luca is still the coming victim of somebody who is about to be possessed. His symptoms get worse and worse as the game goes on, as he experiences more and more hallucinations, as he comes to terms with something horrible that he has done that he cannot remember, and finds out that his grandmother was also a victim of, as well, of that same entity. Now, poor Luca's story does not exactly end fantastic for him, but it is still a very fantastic game that utilizes a really, really great instant camera mechanic for the game that just chef's kiss, super well done. Using an instant Polaroid camera in horror, again, is not new, but the way that it was done and the delay that it has during the game really, really heightened the tension and the horror for me. I absolutely adored it. Luca's symptoms, of course, included things like very massive hallucinations that took him all the way back in time in different environments, headaches, vision issues. Even what was interesting about the vision issues is that each time they came on, they lasted longer, very slightly, and a very nice, good detail. And of course, the final ending sequence with the entity known as Blue Knees, oof, still quakes me to this day. Now, this was a much more traditional horror, very much that haunted house-esque type of video game horror where you are walking through the house and things are happening and they're terrifying you. Yes, you're solving a few puzzles and going back to certain locations, a la Resident Evil 1 style, but it still has what I like to call the haunted house type and approach of a horror video game. You're walking through an area and things are happening. As opposed to the Mortuary Assistant. Now, the Mortuary Assistant leans a little bit more into, I hesitate to say body horror because mortuary sciences, from their nature, is a clinical thing, but obviously people can be squicked out by that sort of gore. And I ended up finding myself actually slightly relaxed by the monotony of doing the steps of embalming the bodies. It actually helped me personally combat the fears of of at least the first chapter. Although I will say the entity in it, not pictured in this video, it looks like my sleep paralysis demon and definitely did not help me sleep tonight. But the Mortuary Assistant, however, is slightly different. You have a much more heavier focus on investigation in this game than you do in Madison. Obviously in Madison, you have some investigation, you're looking at diary entries, you're discovering certain things that are happening, you're piecing together the story, but that's not necessarily key to your survival. Whereas the Mortuary Assistant, your survival is hinged upon discovering that demon's name, about figuring things out as a way to, and figure out which body to burn as a way to protect yourself. And of course, you're dealing with different demons, so that is something that Madison has in common with it as well. Again, these comparisons are not meant to put one game down over the other, rather just to showcase how interesting it is when video games tackle this very, very specific and niche subgenre of horror. Now, the research was very, very intense, and I was pleasantly surprised by that in the Mortuary Assistant. Cannot gush about that enough. I love it when a game really, really takes its time and just, oh, I love it. I can't even articulate it well. I apologize. I wanted this to be a much more informal video, so thank you for making it this far. And of course, another part about the Mortuary Assistant is discovering the history of your boss as well, someone who has also been dealing with combating demons for a good chunk of his life prior to you. Now, the way that the Mortuary Assistant functions is, rather than the entities in question being attached to objects, houses, a nursery rhyme book, you know, physical objects like they are in Madison, these entities are attached to bodies. However, if one were to find you and to try to possess you, whether you banish it or not, that opens the gateway for others to know who you are and to then start going after you. It's why our protagonist of the Mortuary Assistant keeps coming back for more and more shifts, because at that point it has now become her new life. It has now become her source of survival to prevent a full-on possession. It is not something that she can run away from. Whereas, again, Madison, Luca, poor sweet baby Luca, is just trying to escape and leave. He's just, yes, he has to take on Blue Knees at the end of it for survival, but mainly he is just trying to leave this messed up house. And of course, the Mortuary Assistant has its fair share of freaky things happening to mess with your head, of course. And its fair share of things that are just jumpy and spooky. Now, this isn't as in-depth of a video as I potentially could do. However, again, this was something that I want to use to talk about and highlight and maybe bring about discussion or jog your little thought brain juices to think about the exorcism subgenre in horror and how it is portrayed across various medias. Each piece of media is valid and brings something new to this particular subgenre. However, I really think video games, specifically these two games, do something absolutely wonderful with them and is refreshing to the genre. Again, there's plenty of novels that do have the genre taking on someone who is being possessed from their point of view, but again, as a video game, it is far interesting. And both of these games are not just great for this subgenre, but also just great indie horror games as well. I cannot gush enough about how refreshing they are and how I hope to see these developers continue to grow, make new games, and for other developers to potentially be inspired by them as well in good ways. Not just in this particular subgenre, but, you know, say I don't know, I don't know, a stalker game gets inspired by this. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I hope indie horror as a whole gets really, really inspired by these two games. Thank you so much for making it through this video. I don't have much way to end it. Mostly just want to bring about the discussion. Let me know what you think in the comments about this subgenre. Do you have a favorite movie you like from it? A favorite book? Did you play these games and what did you think? Or do you just, I don't know, got problems with these games? Let me know. Please down below in the comments. And I do live stream on Twitch on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Do a lot of spooky games like these, so hopefully I'll see you there, and thank you so much. Hope to see you soon for another video. Bye bye.